Hi there, welcome to the A.D.K Rock and Metal channel. And today we are joined by Jack Banning, the bass player for British metal quartet Drip Fed Empire. They released their debut album on January the 26th called Revolutionist, and we are privileged, or have been privileged, to listen to it and also give an appraisal for this channel. Andy and I enjoyed it so much, we decided we wanted to interview members of the band, and Jack is joining us tonight. So before we go into the questions, Jack, how's your week been so far?
It's been pretty good. Again, we've got a gig coming up on the 26th, which is the actual launch night. So just been practicing for that. Some little additions that hasn't really been done before in the sense of the show. So I'm helping out with some piano playing, certain little bits, and synth playing as well, sample pads. So that's been a little bit more stress, just learning all that stuff. Other than that, just been at work all the time.
Sounds like the day in the life of most people, certainly me and Andy. So the first thing we want to know then, we always like to ask this question. So many people are calling your music, these are some of the terms they've used to describe it: new metalcore, alternative metal, genre-bending metal, contemporary metal. For the benefit of our viewers, how would you describe the music of Drip Fed Empire?
For myself personally, I call it new metalcore. Just because we have a lot more of those kind of scratchy DJ elements into it. So people can more so like look at it and think, it sounds more like that kind of genre, because we're all massive fans of it. Obviously, you go back to like one of my favorite bands in the world is Korn and System of a Down. So when it came to the kind of naming it, I guess, you look back at bands like, even like weirdly enough, Incubus, because they have a lot of the scratchy things to go around for it, which I only really realized the other day. Like when I say the other day, I mean like 3 days ago, that an Incubus were technically a new metal band, which I was like, I would never have classed that as well, personally. But anything with some scratching in it, that's kind of when I start going down the new metal route, personally.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're right about Incubus, by the way, because I remember when they were big in like the late 90s, and they were always seen as a bit different, weren't they? Because they have like Mr. Bungle, Primus type influences, Jane's Addiction, quite experimental. And post 2003, yeah, they just moved away. I think they evolved quite well, didn't they? Without being pigeonholed into any scene.
Yeah, they've done stupidly well to evolve to where they are now. I haven't listened to them properly in quite a while now, but if you go back to like I can't remember the name of the album, Megalomaniac, I think it was. That's the album called. That was phenomenal back in the day. I loved that one, and just like some of the singles, Pardon Me, Stellar, all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that came out.
live as well, but.
So we want to touch upon the lyrical themes, because Revolutionist to me feels like a prophecy for a dark future for humanity. So what kind of fears and anxieties are coming through as lyrical themes on this album?
So I'll answer as best I can with that, because obviously Jay is the lyricist and he does all that. But for myself, when we were writing some of the songs, for example, Work of God, that was based off of a lot of different things that he was looking into, like religious things. So it was a cult. It's all kind of based around, and just basically following something that you think is right, but can be the complete opposite end of what the message really is. For example, the Work of God is about like the Son of Sam.
Yeah.
You know about that guy who basically classed himself as a Satanist, but was following on to certain sections of the Bible. So was following along those lines. So it's in the book, but he was reading into it to a certain degree where it was in his mind was telling him to do all these terrible, terrible things. And if you kind of look at the world at the moment, there's a lot of that kind of going on, a lot of bad things happening, and a lot of religious wars. And so there's two sides to every story. It depends on what you're following. And that's kind of how I've seen that. And Arcane was basically making your own decision. So the whole idea of that was like an archangel been given an order and kind of thinking that's not right. I shouldn't do that. So you're kind of in the middle of all these things, like a higher power is telling you do this, but you're starting to question it. So now you're in this weird little limbo where you don't really know what the next move is.
Yeah, it's like, that last moral dilemma you described, a bit like the Nuremberg trials, isn't it? Taking orders from above. I was just following orders. Well, that was not an acceptable moral argument, was it, for the defense of the Nuremberg trials? So yeah.
Kind of goes back to what's happening in Russia right now. There's like people just getting put in there and they're surrendering when they get out because they've just been told go and do this thing when none of them want to do it, but they're scared to say no because they know what happens to them if they do, which is it's awful in the world right now. But hopefully we're hoping for a better future at some point soon enough.
Yeah.
Jack, welcome. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, as Kirk said. Before I move on, just carrying on with the lyrical theme question, we were all fascinated by MK4. I mean, I jokingly said is it a tribute to the Mortal Kombat video games? It clearly isn't. But just quickly, what's that one about?
I actually couldn't tell you too much about that one. That's the only reason. Is because again, Jay's the one who wrote that one, and we've only really spoke about like the really deep ones, so Work of God and Arcade had names. But the name for our MK4, it used to be called Wandering Soul, was the kind of working title for the longest time. But because it has that really weird, like hard styley, electric cowboy-esque thing at the end, we wanted to kind of mimic one of the songs we've done in the past, which was called MK3, Mark III.
Okay.
So we nice little add-on. So if people get it, they get it. And we've got some pretty diehard fans for ourselves, so they straight away thought, that's right, we know what you're doing. It's a gentleman named Josh. He's the main guy. He's the one that will come to every single show if he possibly could. Buys every merchandise item we've got. He's got our logo tattooed on him.
Good man.
That's when we were kind of like, I don't even have that, and I was just like, wow, that's pretty crazy.
If you cast your mind back to our album review, we name checked about a dozen bands. I mean, you mentioned Electric Callboy. That was one of them. I threw in Theatre of Tragedy. There was Pitch Shifter. Dave said Hollywood Undead. Many others as well. Which of those bands that we talked about in the review would you say best encapsulates sort of Drip Fed Empire's sound and influences?
So weirdly enough, when I watched it over, me and Jay both watched it, and you said Pitch Shifter. We'd never listened to Pitch Shifter, which is the most ironic thing. As soon as we put it on, we're like, oh my God, yeah, that's right. That's pretty spot on. We didn't ever know, but we knew the name as far as it went. And a tutor at our old university was one of the guitar players for Pitch Shifter back in the day, maybe early 2000s. But yeah, we had never paid attention. And it was like, I think it was 2 days ago when he told me about them, because obviously people had said it in the past. And when we watched the review, he was like, have you listened to Pitch Shifter? I went, no. He went, listen to Genius. Put it on, and right away I was like, oh my God. We somehow stumbled across the same mindset 30 years later.
Yeah.
But when it comes to influences, a lot of people kind of say like the Rage Against the Machine-esque for the vocal sense, just because obviously he's got a lot of spoken word, but kind of like his voice itself, kind of that's how he kind of projects. The Prodigy-esque, we're very heavily influenced by that. Enter Shikari, very heavily influenced by what they do on their third album, which is called A Flash Flood of Color. Just a bit more heavy on the electronic side, a bit more aggressive to the vocal side. And trying to think. That's the only ones I can remember at the moment. Probably someone will come back to me at some point.
Yeah.
Shall I just carry on regarding the band name as well?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, because you believe you know what it's trying to say, don't you, Andy? So yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, we talked about it again in the review, and you sort of touched on it when you discussed the lyrical themes. But to me, it didn't mean a lot initially. But when I listened to the album, looked at the album titles, sort of took from the lyrics as much as I could. I'm wondering whether you've got a view of this possible dystopian future whereby we're all controlled by government or an even higher organization, and we're drip fed information, and our lives are controlled. Is that sort of in the right ballpark for the sort of meaning behind the band name?
You're definitely on the right track. So it was our drummer Bircher who came up with the idea of it. And the way that I've been described it from those guys anyway, is that when things that are obviously put down as like a law are implicated, you never truly know when it starts. It's just over the years, you start realizing something's already happened. So they're drip feeding you this brand new thing that you're about to live your life by. So you don't get a say in it at all. There's no way that you're allowed to say yes or no to it. Just at certain points, you're going to realize you are now wrong and you're breaking the law, and that you're now being controlled in a way that you didn't think was even possible 5 years ago, because it's been slowly drip fed you. You've been drip fed it, sorry, for years. And then by the time you've realized it, way too late for anybody to speak up and say anything. So they're drip feeding you the empire. They're pushing it all down your throats whenever you're not thirsty.
That's a very succinct
makes sense. Yeah,
explanation. Yeah, do you know what? I don't get a sense of cynicism in your band either. I appreciate what you're doing there. You know, apparently we have a healthy suspicion of authority, don't we, in Britain? I'm not too sure that's the case now, certainly in the COVID era. But yeah, I really do appreciate how you're using that, as it's not even a metaphor. You're saying this is something that has happened throughout history, certainly in, the industrial age with the explosion of literacy and people having the right to vote. But those that control us, they need to be smarter, don't they, in the way that
Yeah,
they do that. Can I just ask about, I'm taking I don't think, are you a founding member of the band, Jack?
but I'm not. There's been quite a few lineup changes, but originally it was the drummer Bircher and Jay, and there was the vocalist. That was it. They were a two piece. That was it for the longest time. And then Jordan joined because he pestered Jay in a pub once. And he said, "You know what your band needs?" And he was like, "What?" He went, "A guitar player." And he went, "Maybe." And then he came back to him after a couple of gigs. And he was like, "Yeah, we need a guitar player." And that was that. And then they had a gentleman called Reese in for bass for a long time. He left to do, as we described it, adult life. He wanted to get a proper job. Obviously, he's engaged as well, what I believe. So, and I was friends with those guys for the longest time. So one night during the COVID era, when we were having the social gatherings, as they said, he basically just came up to me and goes, "Do you want to just join the band?" I was like, "Yes." Was the answer to that one. So yeah, and there's been a couple of drummers who have kind of come and gone. Bircher, again, was the original. And then I went to a gentleman named Sam. And then I went back to Bircher because well, I think there was a falling out and then they all made up and he wanted him back. Because Bircher's a phenomenal songwriter. He just kind of does things in his spare time and will come up to you with 12 songs. Like, "Oh, when did you do that?" He was like, 2 weeks ago. Like, okay.
So it sounds like the next album's probably already sketched out in Birch's
Yeah.
on his laptop.
You know exactly what he's about. And he'll bring stuff that obviously sometimes we are like, "Nah, not that one." Or yes, that section from that one, we'll do something with it. But yeah, he's a pretty on it guy when it comes down to writing songs.
Excellent. My question relates to the album that's as you said, due out January the 26th. What is your personal, and perhaps you can answer for some of the rest of the guys in the band, your the song you're most proud of and why?
Of God, simply because of the actual context of it. I love the whole idea of like, there's such tragedy happening, and someone asks, "Why is this happening?" So you could answer, "It's the work of God," because to them, they're doing exactly what they've been told to do from what they believe is the omnipotent being of their entire life. Nothing is above them, nothing is below them. They are the absolute be all of end all. Jay's favorite is Arcane. He absolutely adores that song. Same with Jordan. And I believe that Bircher's favorite was a Digital Drug because he's the one who wrote that song completely and brought it to us. He loves his little synth solos. So when he wrote that, he was like, "We're not changing that part, basically. That stays." We're like, "No, the whole thing's fine."
Cool. My next one is regarding the live setup. I think you touched on it earlier when you said when Kirk asked how your week was. You said you've been rehearsing and you were doing a few keyboard parts and a few sort of sample pad parts. My question was, can you replicate as a band that live structure of each of the songs, or is there a backing track, or does Jay do some of it? Do you do some of it? Just tell us how you sort of play through a typical song from the album live.
Yeah. So right now, what we've introduced, what we didn't have in the past, so we usually all the things that were like kind of more electronic, like the 808 sounds, all that stuff was which is on a backing track. So obviously we kind of focus more on the instrumentation. But then Jay would always have the sample pad in front of him and like a DJ scratch pad. So he'd have like a live disc going round and he would scratch it all live. We'd always done that. We always really enjoyed that. But this time around, he wants to do a bit more piano, like synths playing as well. So he was like, "I need someone to take over a little bit." So, and to make the live performance a bit more interactive for us, Bircher has now got a sample pad where he's hitting all the 808 sounds, all the claps and all that stuff. So he'll switch between the two, the live kit and the sample pad. I will, because I'm the bass player, I'll be playing the bass and I'll be playing my little MIDI keyboard and I have a sample pad above that. Jay has his scratch pad, his sample pad. He's got two different microphones. And Jordan is just playing the guitar and hitting a lot of pedals.
Sounds like a sound engineer's nightmare, but that sounds fantastic.
Great time.
Say again.
They're not going to have a great time, but as long as it sounds good at the end and it goes off well, that's the main thing for us.
Cheers.
Because we're a quite energetic
Yeah.
bunch. We
What
always
are
run
those
around.
sample pads for? Do you know, you said you've got a MIDI keyboard and sample pads.
Yes.
Are you using that for like percussive purposes or to trigger samples?
So, like for example, the start of Work of God, it's got that kind of like that do 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 do. So I'm doing that part because it's on a bit of an offbeat, and Jay was playing something else, or he was doing something else, and he was like, it confuses me a tiny bit, and I don't want to mess it up. But can you do it? I went, yeah, that's completely fine. With the keyboard, it's more for the system reset because it's very gentle, and there's two keyboards playing at the same time, and it can't be done by one person. So he asked me the other night. He was like, "Can you do the arpeggios and I'll do the lead part?" I was like, "Yeah, cool, it's fine with me." Gives me something to do in the song.
I bet that's fun. You know, I bet a rehearsal's fun for your band as well, getting everything set up and with the samples and
If we
the
if we book,
trigger effects.
we book a 4 hour rehearsal, which we normally do, an hour of that is just getting everything to work. And sometimes you have power cuts, which happened the other night. So we're in the room and something just short circuited, and we set everything up. We were finally ready. Everything went off. Spent another half an hour setting it right back up. So that was very much not a fun time for anyone who was in that room. It was too cold, then it was too hot because we were stressed.
I can see why it has been a stressful, moderately stressful week as well, you know, preparing for this show in Bristol. So I just want to understand more about the songwriting process in the band, how it works. Is it sharing files? Is it one person? You mentioned Bircher doing it on his laptop and you've got to learn the parts. Are you jamming this out in a rehearsal studio? How are these songs coming together?
So a lot of times, there's so many different ways that we do it. So we have a Google Drive. We've all got a folder where it's just like Jack's pool. So it's like Jack's song pool or Jay's pool or whatever it is, and everyone can just look. Every now and then we'll just dip into it, and if we're like, oh, have you heard that one that I did? And then we'll listen to it and be like, no, that's definitely something. Or Jay will come to us with an entire finished synth track with lyrics and vocals and a drum set, and everything's basically there. It just needs to be worked on. Or for example, it will just be a jam in the session room. Like the other night, we started jamming something, and then Jay, being Jay, just kind of gets his phone out and just records us doing it. And he goes, "That's really cool. We'll come back to that." And then we always think he might forget. He doesn't. He will come back to it. And then 10 days later, he'll come back with 3 finished songs, like done. It's like, cool, let's learn it. It's like, oh, okay. That was quick.
So what about what one thing that intrigues me, Tyler, is I know we've mentioned pitch shifter. I think what sometimes put me off new metal, it was just so much of an LA thing, wasn't it? You know, like the fashion and
Yeah.
But when I hear your music, it sounds distinctly British, whether that's the accent, you know, and the aggressive vocals, but even the influences of the Prodigy as well. What other British influences or British artists do you listen to?
I've got quite a varied music taste, I like to believe. Like, obviously, I really like a lot of the really heavy stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of Knocked Loose, Lorna Shore, for the most random thing, Cannibal Corpse, because they're just funny, I think. One of those bands you don't listen to seriously. You're just like, I'm going to listen to Hammer Smash Face or, I Come Blood. It's just silly little things like that. But I'm also a huge Beatles fan. I love the Rolling Stones, ELO, just anything to do with that. But when it comes to like my absolute favorite bands, Enter Shikari, Bring Me the Horizon, who else? Architects, love Architects, Ice Nine Kills, things like that. It's not a British band. What am I on about? I'm just naming my bands. But when it came to the new metal thing, I understood that it was very LA. But when there was a small scene kind of growing back when I was in secondary school, when I was about 12, 13, there was definitely a scene growing within the UK that people were more experimenting. They were more experimenting with that kind of scratchiness, the kind of aggressiveness, but with that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of weirdly party kind of atmosphere to it. Made you want to move instead of just making you feel aggressive.
Yeah.
So as I was growing up, I was like, oh, I love it. I love this concept. So that's my idea on it anyway.
Jack, going back or looking forward to your album launch show, we've discussed the fact that many of the parts are going to be covered live. You know, the electronics and everything. You even mentioned system reset which me and Kirk both love from the album. Does that mean it's going to be a sort of start to finish full album performance, or is there a particular set list you've got in mind for that show?
So yeah, it's going to be start to finish for the first few parts. So basically, we're going to do the whole album straight front to back, and then go into some of our older stuff that people already kind of know and already enjoy, and we enjoy ourselves. Like obviously, we've got songs that some people don't really enjoy as much as, for example, myself. But at the end of the day, as long as I can, laugh halfway through, that's my kind of catalyst of I'm having a good time. It's all good. It's all fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've just got two further questions from that. So, what this might be useful for other bands that are in your position, because you've started to get a bit of attention. There's a real buzz about this record as well. What's the most decisive thing the band have done in the last 6 months, in your opinion, to get people talking about this upcoming album?
I think for us personally, whenever we do play shows, we try to put a show on. So when it comes down to there's a little thing that we did recently. We played a gig in Sheffield to a relatively okay crowd. I was pretty happy with that. But maybe 300 people, I think it was. It's just planning how to start. That's to me, because we've done gigs obviously in stages really small, as everyone will do in their band life, where you just kind of stand with your back to the crowd, and it's really weird. It does feel odd, but just having something as simple as planning how you're going to come on and how I like to look at it is a big thing, and it starts everything off pretty well. So that to me, I know it sounds really small in the grand scheme of things, but to me, just that small amount of detail was one of the better things that we've actually done, because it makes us excited as we're waiting, because we're usually side stage kind of watching, and then we hear our cue and we run. We run on, and the first thing that me and Jordan do is we just start kicking in the air and we'll spin. And at one point we did a gig where I fell over and Jordan just did a roll over me on the floor, and I thought, my bass is broken. I got up and everything was working fine. And the whole idea for the rest of the gig was just one of us trying to jump over everyone. So it's just planning out what you're actually going to do to an extent, and then just take it there. But yeah, the intro was the biggest one. I like to think was the kind of main thing we really planned out. Instead of just standing there, back to the crowd, not really too sure. Usually we kind of move and we kind of groove a little bit and we dance until it begins. But what we were doing was literally running as fast as we possibly could and just going full on. And we stay there for as long as we physically can do it, until there's a little moment in the song where we have to calm it down a small amount, and then we'll run around and do weird things again.
We need to see you live then, don't we?
Yeah, we do this thing near the end of one of our sets. We down beers while still playing, and then I give my bass to someone in the audience to finish the set, just you're a part of this now. So we played Bloodstock a couple years ago, and I did the same thing, because luckily enough we were having conversations with Kramer and Epiphone, so they gave us some guitars to use. I was like, this is pretty cool, and I just gave it to someone in the crowd of Bloodstock. So in my head I was like, you have now also played this festival. Technically you've played an instrument through the amps on the stage, you were on the cameras, you've done it. So to me, if that happened to me at a younger age when I was there, I would have been oh my god, I'll never forget this.
Just on that, Bloodstock, what was your route to Bloodstock? Did you win the Metal to the Masses competition?
We did. So we'd entered a good few times, but the whole reason behind entering, really, because for the most part, we don't really do the contest thing. It's not really been massive on us, but our manager at the time said, you'll always get a really good crowd, because there's a lot of people come down. We're like, yeah, we may as well enter it and just see what happens. So we did it a few times. We got to the semi-finals and the finals a couple of times. And then my first ever gig with the band was Metal to the Masses, and we got to the final. And then sadly we lost that one. But then it was the next year. We just thought, yeah, again, Nottingham, they really seem to enjoy us. We'll head back over. And yeah, we won. Simple as that, really.
Congrats. I mean, I think that in the future, even now, that really is the ultimate badge of honor, isn't it, for bands coming up from grassroots? Because on this channel, we cover the heat that's in Hitchin in Hertfordshire at a venue here, and that's well attended, and some great bands have gone on from that. But my last question, probably a bit mischievous, and it's not, don't take this negatively, but how do you want the band to be remembered if you were to split up tomorrow?
Live shows, 100%. Because like when I joined, one of the first questions I asked was like, "Can you do what Reese did?" And I was like, because I'd seen him live. He would run into me head first into the crowd and push me against the wall, and then just push me back and then run back on stage. And I was like, "That's cool." And then my answer basically was like, "Well, you guys do it." And they went, "We always do it." And then I went, "Then you've got nothing to worry about." So then the first gig I ever did with them, I ran into the crowd and, I was laying on my friends' like laps as they sat, because it was COVID era, so we weren't meant to be standing, but you were still allowed to have 35 people in a room, which whatever that may have been. But yeah, I was lying on their laps and I started like crawling on my stomach around them and all that stuff, and I fell on the floor. So to me, in my head, it's always like, if you're going to remember anything about the band, please remember the live shows, because I enjoy them as much as hopefully they enjoy them.
Last one from me, Jack. Scrolling through your sort of past events on your Facebook page, I noticed you played Portland Arms in Cambridge with my friends in Acadian in June 2022. Was that before your time? No, you was in the band.
No, I joined in early 2020, I think it was. I can't honestly remember.
Yeah, it's one of those where I thought, well, I wish I was a fan, because I'd have definitely gone. I didn't attend that one. I mean, I did miss that one, but I definitely would have made it for that, because I love Acadian as well. So my question is, what are your plans for the rest of the year? Do they include shows in Hertfordshire or Cambridgeshire that we can come to the channel and attend? And anything else obviously got in mind?
So from what we've got planned at this moment in time, obviously we've got the Bristol show. We've got a show in Nottingham on the 4th of February, sorry, I believe. I could be wrong about that, so I need to, we'll post about all this stuff. In March, we're playing in Camden, at a pub there, who had us for a Heat at the Metal of the Masses thing. Like, here's the winners, you headline. But then they just really liked us, so they wanted us to come back. And that was, again, how I described the show is, it was snowing outside very heavily. So there's a break in one of the songs where the guitar does nothing for 3 minutes. So Jordan ran out and started making snowballs and came back in and just started throwing them at all of us from the crowd. And he was giving the crowd snowballs to throw at us. And I was like, this is phenomenal. Other than that, I know we've got some things in the works, but nothing has been confirmed yet from March onwards. I know we've got more coming, but it's just getting it all organized to a date where we can all kind of basically say yes. We're hoping, because obviously we went to Germany last year, and we're hoping to somehow get back there at some point this year, if there's a possibility, and if the people want us. But our biggest growth on Spotify, randomly enough, was Germany. So,
thank you.
Yeah, one of my favorite countries to visit as well.
Well,
it's great, isn't it, Germany? Well,
probably the best one. I like to think that was.
Yeah.
Show was packed. People were into it. Sold a lot of merch, which is always really beneficial for us, just because of the amount of traveling we bloody had to do. We're in a small car with enough equipment to probably fill a small room.
Yeah. Which bands have you supported then? You've supported some quite big bands, haven't you, over the last few years?
Yeah. So if you go back before my time, Electric Callboy was one of the ones I supported. Attila was another one. There's a few other bands that I'm trying to think. We've done a band called this was quite a recent one. I was at Crofters Rights late last year.
Oh, no.
Shade. That's a band called Shade, and they're starting to do really, really well. A Linkin Park tribute band that Jay is also a part of. They get crowds of like 1,000 to sometimes that, which is great for us. So, but it's a lot of discussion between like the tour manager. It's like, can I get my band on as well? But for the most part, we're all friends, so the answer is normally yes. But sometimes you've got to pull the trigger and say, can't be done. Sorry. But I'm trying to think of any more now. But again, Bloodstock, that was, again, if you think about the bands who were after us in that sense, who were in the same position, some of them have done really, really well recently. And we're trying to get something organized with a band called Calva Louise. Like, we think they're brilliant. And to go back out with a band called Alt Black Era, that's it. And they were brilliant, and they were playing Download this year. They're doing the whole thing, which is absolutely phenomenal. And they were great people. We'd love to do some more things with them as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for joining us. I hope our viewers go and check out this album, Revolutionist. I'd like to see another music video from you guys. I mean, if you haven't got much of a budget, if you've got friends that are film studies students or anything like that, bring them
Well,
in because I think your music is quite cinematic.
so on the 19th, we actually do have a new song coming out with a music video.
And that's not on the album. Is this a?
It is on the album. But yeah, don't worry. We're already started to plan a little bit other things that are going on in the background. So once this is all done, all out in the open and all released and all the fun things, that's kind of when we'll start doing more singles. Simply because obviously we want to try and fill the gaps. Because from what we found in the past, when we released like Disinformation back in 2021, I believe, we didn't have a video for that for a little bit, and it came out. It was doing really well. Video went on, it did even better. And then we didn't do anything for a long time because obviously we were trying to get the money to do all this. And then that's kind of when you start seeing it die down and die down. So we want to keep on top of it instead of letting it, simmer. We want to keep the pot hot, as they say. That's the idea anyway. So we've got a couple ideas of what to do next. But again, it's got to get back into the practice room, see what we can come up with and get everyone on the same page, really, which is easier said than done.
Excellent. Well, 26th of January, it'll be hitting the streaming platforms. Is it on CD and vinyl as well? Is that, yep.
CD, yes. Vinyl, not at the moment, but that is definitely a plan.
And then one more shout out to your number one fan. What's he called? The guy who would follow you to every gig?
Josh Finch.
Josh Finch. So I assume you already know, Josh, that the vinyl will be later, but I assume you'll be buying the CD as well, and that'd be a great purchase. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining us, Jack. Really appreciate it.
Very much.
Cheers, Jack.
Thank you.